Tagline for the podcast: Can you escape the madness of your own brain? Featuring Devin Tupper.
All right, Finn, introduce the topic while I sort this out.
So you'd say that Ralph might have a creative attachment to Andy's lap right now. Not unlike most TV shows, films, and other examples of media, where there'd be a creative attachment to some characters, some locations, that sort of thing. And how does that resonate with us in modern day culture, that sort of thing? What do you have to say on this, Andy?
Well, this topic's kind of come about because when we were at Script East Midlands a couple of months ago, some of the feedback that we were given, I think I was having a conversation with Devin where a lot of it, the very common theme was that people are too attached to their script and they're not quite taking on board the constructive criticism for it. So it's kind of like we need to let go of the emotional attachment we have with our creative products to be able to like push them over the, to the next limit, to the next level, sorry, and really bring out that creativity with it. But if you can't let go of it, and can you do that?
I kind of came up with an analogy for this as I was commuting to work the other day. It's kind of like you've got a baby, like you're responsible for a baby. You've spent time nurturing this baby and making sure that it's I'll say house trained. That's the wrong word. Making sure it goes to the toilet, making sure it's fed, looked after, kept safe, that sort of thing. You've made sure that it's at a stage where it can reasonably look after itself, but still needs some kind of parental attachment. And you've basically taken it to the woods and left it to fend for itself. That's basically what doing a script and leaving it for feedback, leaving it for other people to kind of work on that sort of thing feels like. It feels like you're taking a baby and you've abandoned it in the forest and you're waiting for someone to take over for you. Nothing.
It's like that. What is it? That sort of orphan child thing, isn't it? The orphan child gets left on somebody else's doorstep for them to raise, and they can go on a journey without you.
And at some point, the baby will come back to you, and that's when you're successful.
See, our version of Darren Aronofsky's Mother seems a lot less violent, which I think is quite nice, at least.
I haven't actually seen that, but I've heard crazy things about it.
I mean,
like to
there's
familiarize
literally a
us with
point
this.
in the movie, I think, where somebody, I forget where I was listening to this, but I think somebody was talking about it on a podcast or something. They were like, yeah, in the middle of that movie, I was sat next to somebody immediately in the cinema. They stood up and went, they're eating the baby, and then they decided to leave.
Did they eat the baby?
I honestly don't know. It's been such a long time since I've watched the movie, but I know that it's meant to be some kind of massive metaphor about him getting fed up with the studio system in Hollywood, and they always take his babies and destroy them and that sort of thing. I mean, you have one bad experience on Aliens. Wait, no, that's different. That's a different person, different director. Anyway, I'm sure Darren Aronofsky's had his fair share of issues with people touching his movies and stuff.
See, the only thing I know about that film is he got with Jennifer Lawrence while they were filming it.
Which is when you watch the film, you think, what a weird way to get into a relationship with somebody. I mean, this kind of completely is detracting from the topic at hand. We've derailed immediately.
Devin, is there anything that you've ever been really emotionally attached to as a piece of work to the point where it's blinded you?
Always, yeah, always. I think I don't want to say it's part of my process because that's definitely not. It's definitely not. But I think it's when writing for me becomes a point of that fine line between creativity and therapy, that it becomes an emotional, I would say dangerously emotional investment on my end. And it's only really ever happened with one play that I wrote, which was happening at a very difficult point in my life, where I had sort of was just taking everything that was kind of happening and using that as a context and a narrative skeleton to basically build a play out of. and it was just I had sent it to one of my closest friends to read, and she read it and she literally called me the next day and was like, "Are you okay?" Because she was basically because she was like, "This is the rawest thing I've ever read that you've ever written, and it's very intense and it's crap." But it's not. But it's very
Respectfully, it's
obvious.
shit.
I mean, she was very much doing me a favor in the sense of like, this isn't how you normally write. You, you have a detachment, you care about your characters, but never before have I really put characters through my own experiences in that sort of way, into that specificity. Um, and that play never really got much. It received sort of a digital table read during COVID, and I just remember people sort of reading that and begun to sort of immediately attach it to people that I knew. And while the context was the same, the characters were entirely different.
Mm.
And so, because of that, it just felt like a very dangerous line to sort of be a part of. Because I think at the end of the day, when you're so emotionally blinded by something, that you run afoul of doing what I think a lot of us do, which is, the narrative suddenly starts getting twisted. I think it twists in a way that doesn't feel natural to the characters, but to your warped vision of the characters. And so when I revisited that play and started rewriting that play and drafting that play, that kind of became the interest, where this main character that was originally this kind of avatar of my life experience at the time suddenly became this like control freak, in the way that then sort of manifested in like quite literally the play is about this person framing a narrative and puppeteering the people in his life, and the people in his life actually breaking away from that, and like breaking out of that control from this person who, for all intents and purposes, was a stand-in for me, which was a really interesting journey to go through. But I couldn't get to that interesting self-reflection from a perhaps a therapeutic point of view, but also from a narrative point of view, without actually having enough emotional distance to it. Otherwise, the entire thing would have just been this play of I'm the victim and everyone's being bad to me and I don't deserve it, as opposed to like, but what is actually going on here? And what is I think this is the interesting thing, is that when you can emotionally remove yourself from things that you write, you suddenly gain not just an insight into the story, but in the way that yourself almost as well. Because oftentimes I think when you sort of if you don't do that, you start to kind of, I don't want to say manifest delusions, but it feels like that way sometimes.
I know obviously everyone believes in their script and they should believe in their script. There's a certain point where it's like you believe in your script, but you're not willing to see that there might be things to work on, there might be errors that you may not have seen, that sort of thing. And when you've become that kind of engrossed in this piece of work is golden, it doesn't need to be changed, that sort of thing, that's when you can get a little bit tricky. It gets a little bit tricky because you're like, if you don't want to improve upon it, there's nothing to kind of progress you forward, kind of thing. And to relate back to what Devin just said, I completely get that. It's kind of like things like when you're writing it, you don't realize like how deep into it. It's like, is this what the character's thinking? Is this what I'm thinking and I'm projecting onto the character? Am I writing as therapy, or am I then taking that and bending my characters to fit that mold, basically, rather than acting true to the character rather than true to me, I think.
You got to have like that dissonance between, I'm looking at this piece of work and I'm seeing myself, or I'm looking at this piece of work and I'm just seeing fiction and the character, and I want to improve on it for the for the narrative, for the story, for the plot, for everything creative about it, or do I want to work on it for me, and it is a therapeutic piece? You've got to have that separation, and you've got to recognize that separation. And it sounds like your friend's feedback came at a time where you could recognize that and you could take that on board.
It's those interesting things, because sometimes when I really think back to that moment, it was part that I sort of could take that on board, but not in a way that was so. Because the problem is that I heard what they said, But realistically, I didn't actually act on that for about 3 years. You know what I mean? Like I got this. It was more of like I had a little torpedo fired at me, and it made a little hole in the ship, and the ship just kept taking on water for about 3 years. Because at the time, like I was really, really struggling, but then, you know, a lot of different things happened. Like I got work on another TV show, so I was able to leave my circumstances. Like I started my master's. That was just like a year off to literally just focus on writing. So it was a really big shift and a big fresh air. And then being able to come back to that play and saying and being able to have that space and that nugget in the back of my brain of like somebody essentially telling me you're not ready to write this. And I think that's a bit of advice that I really take on, especially for people who want to write about things that are really close to them, that they're really emotionally attached to, is like really being honest with yourself and saying, are you actually ready to write this? Because, and it was that bit of advice I also heard somebody else give to somebody else on my master's, where they were writing about a very traumatic incident to themselves and saying, are you ready to actually revisit this?
Mm.
Because because there's also that fine line too, like, is this, and this ties back to Devin's old, adage of the right story for the right medium, in the sense that is the story that you want to write, is this appropriate for, like, are you ready to write this? But also, does it need to be fictionalized? Does it need, like, does the story actually lend itself to a narrative lean, in the sense that, does it need a 3-act structure? Because, life isn't a 3-act structure. We all don't get, redemption or a hero's arc, and out of life. Sometimes it's just relentless and ongoing, and 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 even when people write nonfiction, or they write memoir, they still have the leanings of narrative structure, but not in the sense that they're all sort of that satisfying rub on the back that you kind of want at the end of a story, or that pit that falls out from under you and you know create some sort of emotional catharsis. Maybe it is just banal. Like it just lands flat because life is just flat sometimes, and that's perfectly okay. But it always ties back to that question of like, where are you at when you come to this story, and can you recognize those things? And as you mentioned, Andy, earlier, like that question coming out of Script East Midlands of looking at the different feedback, and you can kind of tell, because sometimes I think there's a big difference, I feel, when you want to defend a script, and you can tell when somebody sort of defends, if somebody gives some criticism and they're able to give a response, and that response is, well, I've done it this way because of X, Y, and Z, versus, I'm not going to actually answer the question, I'm just going to talk about something else.
What you don't
Like that,
understand is XYZ. The
yeah.
difference to
And
what I was really going for is blah.
yeah. And so it's one of those things where it's sort of, that being able to if you have that distance to be able to articulate, then suddenly this thing you're going to get a lot of growth from, and you're going to be able to use this process to transform, as opposed to, yeah, if you're too close to it, you might not see something that's right in front of your face.
It's quite interesting to see it at Script East Midlands specifically, when you see someone who, when you're, say for example, you're giving really constructive feedback, because let's face it, I don't really give a lot of feedback, and Finn, you do give some good stuff. I just sit quietly.
Thank you.
But particularly Devon, when you're giving your feedback, it's really telling how people react to it as to whether they're emotionally invested in that or not. Because what you give is always constructive. It's always like, it's not a shit sandwich, but it's it's complimentary, but it's constructive at the same time. It's not like a hard, oh, I fucking hate it, you need to change everything.
It's like, what is
You gotta
this?
really-
I wouldn't even wipe my ass with this.
No, but you're really good at it. But then sometimes people don't take it very well, in that they're kind of dismissive of what you say, and you can see it in their face. You can hear it in their words, that what you're saying isn't resonating with them. It's not landing.
Yeah.
And it's quite an interesting experience. So.
And I will just concur with what Andy said. Like when I am lucky enough to be in Script East Midlands and hear a feedback from yourself, Devin, it's always very very well thought out. It's always the best kind of feedback you could ever get. It's not like you're amazing, this is amazing, go to the BBC or go to NBC tomorrow. And it's always kind of like very nuanced, very kind of like exactly what the writer needs to hear at that moment, whether they accept it or not. So yeah.
Thank you. And as much as I will continue to love to receive praise at it. I did do that job for 6 years, as a script editor, where it was literally, the one of my first jobs in film and TV as an assistant script editor was sitting there and having to spend about 7 months learning how to give feedback in a way that, to be a bit rude about it, one of the script editors I used to work with was very much sort of like, we're a bit like directors in that we have to actively manipulate people to give us what we want, in the way that you give an actor notes, but you don't directly tell them, I want you to do that, because that doesn't help them evolve their process and like engage their process. So you always have to frame things in a way that sort of leans them towards a particular idea that you can see and could potentially work. But then the excitement of that is that if you kind of show them that road and they start going down that road, but by going down that road, they go to a different road that's actually more in line to their characters, to their story, to their process, because they know it better than you do, then that kind of is still a win-win anyway, because you're just, I'm like the worst sat nav in the world as an editor. I'm just sort of like, you don't have to go right, you don't have to go left, but if you went right, what could happen? If you go left, what would happen? But maybe not a good thing, because I can see up here on the map there's a river, and so there might not be a road there. Maybe don't go that way. But this right road, something could be down there.
And then the person
Oh
goes,
my
thank
God.
you, and then it walks in a completely opposite direction.
Yeah.
That sounds like my counselling training.
Your counselling training.
Do say, do
Yeah,
tell.
that sounds exactly like it. No, like just the whole, you can't give them the answer, but you kind of got to go, just have a look around that corner. Just have a look. What do you think's around there?
It's like nudging them in the right direction, but not like pushing them in the
Yeah.
right direction.
But this is the thing, I think, which I've kind of only thought about recently. I don't know, have either of you ever watched the YouTube videos of Thomas Flight? So I think Thomas Flight does a lot of like video essays and a lot about like cinema and movies and TV and things like that. And he did a video recently about the difference of like basically why AI art doesn't quite land with us. And the big thing is he was saying that it's like he was referencing some people in some literature that sort of talk about the difference between art and what's referred to as artifice. And so AI is really good at making artifice, but he basically makes the argument that AI can't make art because AI doesn't have a organic process. It's purely statistical and mathematical. And so when you basically take something and you generate it in that way, because there's no process behind it, there's no journey to go on to create it, you're just bound to kind of get something that essentially feels a little bit soulless. And so in that way, I always feel like when what really felt rung true for me as an editor was engaging with somebody's process as opposed to the end product. So a lot of times when I would give writers feedback, I'd always try to get to know them in terms of their interests. What are the stories, the movies, the books that interest them, that sort of really engage them? And then in that way, you can start like phrasing feedback in terms of how they engage with something. There was one script where I was giving feedback on, and I could tell that the writer was really attached to this idea. And so the idea behind the script was that there's, I think, episode 5 or 6 in a 10 episodes in the first season. And we were doing a big tonal change where we were essentially based in the UK. And then suddenly this second latter half of the season was going to break out and be very international. And so one of the topics that we were talking about was, well, how do we make that break? How do we make it feel big while also being very aware of the fact that we didn't have that much money for the TV show, right? And we had this whole opening sequence where it was going to be like corporate espionage. Somebody was going to break into a skyscraper in Malaysia, steal some secret hard drive, all this other stuff. And it felt dangerous and it was exciting. And then I was like, God, like, but this really comes out of nowhere because we're essentially this drama, this family drama, and then we're taking this family drama and we're putting it on a large stage. And there's a point to that thematically of like, basically, we're putting pressure on the family, right? But we're going onto this grand stage and we're sort of opening and we haven't seen our main characters in like 10 minutes. So I was like, okay, but I can tell that they really love this scene. So how do we sort of like look at the themes? And I suddenly realized he was a really big fan of Brian De Palma films. So I was like, okay, like think about a Brian De Palma film. You know, there's a lot of long takes. He can like really build a lot of scale and momentum. Like, you know, with, I mean, I don't, have either of you seen Blowout?
Mm-mm.
John Travolta. I think it's Blowout. I'm just going to double check that it's Blowout. Because there's the film it's based off of, which is called Blow Up, which I don't think it is. I think it's Blowout. Hold on. You can cut this.
Fact
It is
check on my
Blowout.
author.
Yes, I've won. 1981, Blowout. But there's a scene in the movie where the massive emotional climax happens, and we are literally just punched in on John Travolta's face, and there's fireworks going off in the background. So we're just doing a 360 around him. We're not really seeing much action, but you kind of, through that camera movement and that momentum, you get like the big scale of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was basically like, oh, well, you know, is there a way to sort of keep this action and kind of narrow it down a little bit while keeping our characters sort of, you know, really front and central, like that scene in the De Palma movie. And I could see, like, I could hear him on the other side of the phone. It was sort of like, he was like, oh, you know, that's a really good point. You know, we haven't seen our characters for a while. And I was like, and just sort of, and then let him run with that. And the next thing that came back was a fantastic wonder where we're at a hotel in Malaysia, a really bougie hotel, and we just do this wonder by the poolside where we see all of our characters basically all together by the pool, but each of them is like basically being themselves, doing something a bit different, a bit sexy, a bit exciting, that sort of thing. And within that, we suddenly went from a 15-page sort of skyscraper corporate espionage steel thriller to this really intimate punch in of all of our characters doing something slightly different that all the other ones aren't really aware of. And so now we're building tension, and the tension exists, but it sits within characters that we already care about and are invested in. And he had come to this in such a great way. And it was just sort of one of those moments, like, after having done that, I was like, this is a great way for feedback because, you know, you never know what you're going to inspire somebody else to come up with at the end of the day. Because you can have an idea of what you want, but engaging with that process and what excites them as writers, that's what really, like, you know, really takes it in. Because after that Script East Midlands session, Andy, I remember we were talking about, like, there's one thing that this person keeps talking about, which is the thing that obviously excites them, and that's not in their script.
Yeah. I think everyone's a bit guilty of that at some point in their life. Is like going, yeah, but I really want the script to be about, I don't know. We really want the script to be about. I've completely blanked on everything about this particular thing, and then I will talk about everything else except for that thing, and I'll get back around to that thing like in the last 2 pages, if at all. And then I'll be like, oh no, it's about this. And it's like, you've mentioned that twice, and like people have forgotten what that is. Like I think we're
I
all
wonder if
guilty
part
of
of
that.
it's like, I wonder if part of it is fear of investing too much in the script as well. Like, let's face it, this is a you know, like, I won't say a job or a hobby, but this is a sector where you're going to get rejection after rejection after rejection, and you've got to develop a really thick skin. So what if it's a case of you don't want to invest too much emotionally so that you stay, you know, you have that disconnect from when you do get them rejections, so you don't feel it so personally as well, potentially. Spitballing.
Definitely. But I mean, it's also one of those weird, I mean, the thing that exists in what we're trying to do as writers, right, is constantly engaging with contradictions, is the fact that there's sometimes the things that make you unsettled or frightened that you kind of, that's the exciting stuff to write about because you're sort of putting yourself in a vulnerable position. And by doing that, you kind of know that, like, somebody else reading this or watching this is also going to be put in an uncomfortable position because, you know, you feel that way, it's going to come across in the page. So I think that's definitely, like, there's definitely sort of two sides of it where you're almost sort of so unbelievably averse to engaging with the emotionally exciting thing because you don't want to be hurt by it, or you go
Mm.
completely the other way and completely throw yourself into it and almost damage the thing itself because of it.
And on both sides, you kind of get really protective of it as well.
It's not
Yeah.
necessarily the script as well. Sometimes it's like it's the effort you put into it. It's like the mindset you're in when you wrote this. Why can't they see this mindset that was in your head when you were writing this? Why don't they understand that? But obviously, to them, they don't know what was in your head when you were writing this. They can only see what's on the page. They can only judge what's written down. Any subtext or anything like that, it must be on the page. Otherwise, they'll put their own subtext onto it, which will be completely different to what you've envisioned when you were writing it. Which is their right. That's their right to do. Everyone does that. Like when you're watching a TV show on Netflix, stuff like that, you will make your own subtext. You'll think of your own theories about what certain characters are doing and why they're doing it in this particular way, or why was that character killed off, that sort of thing. You'll do it in your head automatically, and like that the writers haven't thought about that. They haven't thought about every possible scenario that someone on a Reddit board or something like that can come up with based on the property that they've written. If you're trying to sell a script, if you're trying to get that script to a point where you're happy with it, you're relying on subtext and that sort of thing, it needs to be innate within the pages. Otherwise, people are going to run for it. Run with it. Sorry, run for it. Run with it.
They're going to run for the hills.
Exactly. Both.
This is, I think, one of the really fascinating things when we think about the difference between like screenwriting or script writing, whether that's for play, radio, or TV and films versus prose, is that subtext is also in the performance.
Yeah.
And so, whereas with prose, you can write your way around subtext to give kind of an overall impression to the reader, a lot of that impression comes from the performance when it comes to sort of anything that's scripted, unless, of course, you're, really like a professional that just everyone's going to hire you no matter what, so you can kind of write your script however you want to. I think I was listening to, again, I just have so much time to listen to too many podcasts. I was listening to the A24 podcast, and it was Ari Aster and oh god, what's his name? Plays Barry in the Barry TV show. Oh,
My first thought was not Barry TV show, it was EastEnders. It's definitely not Sean Williamson.
I was thinking of the guy from Saltburn.
no, it's Ari Aster and Bill Hader.
Bill Hader, I know you mean.
There's no Barry there.
No, he plays a character called Barry.
Barry. It's his brother Barry Hader.
Directs and stars in. But so apparently they're good friends, and he read Ari Aster's Eddington script. Have you two seen Eddington?
No. Stop asking if we've seen things. The answer's going to be no every time.
Have you seen this? And we just like look at him like, please inform us so we don't feel so silly.
Eddington is basically a COVID movie about a small town in Texas. And it stars Joaquin Phoenix and Pedro Pascal. And the Bill Hader is talking about like reading an initial draft of the script, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that it was like when you read an Ari Aster screenplay, you read the movie, you don't read a script. And I thought that was really, really interesting because Ari Aster is, basically kind of anyone is going to kind of let him make what he wants at this stage, And because of that, like his screenplays can just kind of be what they want. But then there's another side of my brain that's like, or because his screenplays are what they want, is that why they hire him to let him do whatever he wants? Because they can they read it and they know the film, as opposed to like, well, this is a screenplay, maybe somebody can make a film out of this. And I think that's such an interesting thing to have. And it's like, is it because essentially, he's able to just kind of put that subtext on the page and doesn't need the performance to sort of do that? Or is there something, because he's also the director, that he understands visually, and so he's able to put that across to the page because, he knows the camera movements that are going to go into a scene or something along those lines?
He's lucky in the fact that he's got that multifaceted way of looking at things, where he can look at it from a writer's point of view, from an actor's point of view, and from a director's point of view at the same time, and make it all make sense as well.
But that's interesting because I remember you were saying, because I recently listened to the Writing Failings episode.
Oh yes, what
If anyone
podcast was
hasn't,
that?
yeah, it's some weird podcast called Path to Publication. And
I've
if
heard
people
that Andy
have
lady is very
weirdly
lovely on that.
if people have weirdly skipped that episode and like gone to listen to this episode, like go back and listen to that episode. It's a very good episode.
Thank you, Devin.
But you were talking about how you were struggling to take different hats off.
Yeah.
And that's basically what this is that at the end of the day, like you put yourself into an emotional place where you can write and you can produce things honestly and genuinely, but then you have to then switch and put an editor's hat on and say, but okay, does this actually make sense? Like where are these different spaces coming from and going to? And a lot when I was writing really early on, all of that had such, I still struggle with it, but I kind of can make the conscious churn now, even though it still takes me a few drafts to get out of, to be like, oh, this was an edited draft. Like one of my projects that I recently did a redraft of, one of my TV pilots, I have one of the characters basically shoots and kills somebody at the end of Act 1. And then, but this pilot is supposed to be this big love story. And it was sort of like I'd written many drafts. The love story was working really well. It was really romantic in sort of a glamorous kind of 30s, 40s Hollywood sort of fashion because the script takes place in the 50s. And then on the most recent redraft, I just had this moment of like weird clarity where I was like, this dude kills a person in front of my main character, and she just shrugs it off. She's like, you know what? This is everyday normal.
You know what? I'm
I
into
love
this.
this man. This was love at first sight. I'm not struggling with this relationship. I'm all in. But the thing that's making me struggle isn't the fact that these just killed a man in front of me. It's because I want to be a dancer and don't want to get married. And then on this most recent draft, I was like, this is nonsense. If this relationship is actually going to make sense, he cannot touch anyone. He has to be a victim. He has to be hurt. It has to put him in a place of vulnerabilities. The mortality of him is like right in front of her face, and it was just like I had done so many drafts. This script, my manager loved this script. So many people loved this script, and here I'm sitting like, this woman's in love with a sociopath, and no one seems to care. But it didn't feel right because that wasn't the point of the story, right? So suddenly I had characters that I could like that were underutilized, so I could bring them in. They had a bit more context, and it was just this excellent sort of hurricane of like all these characters that weren't doing a lot of lifting in different scenes now have more context, now have more purpose and momentum behind them. But I didn't notice that for so many drafts, and it was only because when I was writing this draft, I was literally had editor head on because I was like, I don't have to touch this scene because I know this scene doesn't need any work. It's done. It makes sense the scene before it and it makes sense for the scene after. I can just move on. I don't have to be like revisit the emotion of that scene.
You had like editor blindness when you're going through that particular draft. It was like, and this would be great as an editing point of view, but from a writing point of view, there's a gap that needs to be broached.
I think that's where our skill set, where we need to learn, is to separate writer emotion from editor practical. And we have to be both those people and know when to switch it. And I think that's a learned skill.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you guys talked about in the last episode, where it's literally about putting the time in to develop those skills, to have those failures, to like, because it's a skill that you have to practice. And if you're not redrafting, you're not re-editing, you're not going to learn that skill, are you?
You're going to keep
Like,
getting tripped up on that first step and not going anywhere.
Yeah, because if you write something and you're emotionally invested, like deeply emotionally invested, and you're like, all the emotions ring true, that's fantastic. And you go and you want to go submit that script, that person will likely have zero emotional contact to that script. Now, the key to getting scripts made, I think, is you find the right people that do have that emotional attachment and will overlook that long enough for somebody really competent to point out the problem, or if you find that problem early on. Because I think, I mean, that's why we have so much art that comes out that's so close to like zeitgeists, right? It's because people have these emotional attachments to something that they can overlook, and maybe more often than not, those things kind of might not get seen because they're sort of like, oh, I'm caught up in the emotion of this. And then you get to like, you release the movie or the TV show to a wide audience, and people are like, there's a massive plot hole here. There's kind of a bit of a problem here. And for some stuff, it's because they go and they shoot it before they even have a screenplay. So of course there's going to be problems. But other things, it might just be that you're so tied up in the emotion of what's going on that you don't notice it. I think we always, in our writers' rooms, we would always refer to that as fridge logic. So everything emotionally makes sense, but then when you get up and walk away from the TV and go get like something out of the fridge, you're like, wait a minute, why did they do that?
There's very that, and there's still like movies I can think of as well where they had that same thing. Where it's like, in the universe of this movie, this all makes complete sense. It's amazing. I can't believe it. The characters got from A to B, and there's been fireworks, and everyone's fine. But then when they walk away from it, like, okay, so how can a car exist in space? Fast and the Furious 10. I mean, that's the least of its issues, but still. How can you launch a car into space with somebody in it and land it and they not die or it blow up? Like, where is the logic there? But I get that obviously you have to suspend certain things to kind of go along with the film. But even so, it's like, okay, but like all of my suspense has now been used up now. Like all the things I'm willing to suspend for you.
But isn't that like kind of like a good example of being caught up in the emotion when writing? Now, I'm not necessarily going to cast aspersions on what emotion, probably like, the fun of it, or, they're probably getting some sort of horny thrill off it, who knows? But, the emotional resonance is overriding the logic at that point.
Yeah, exactly it. That's exactly
Pretty sure
it.
that's the house of cards that Fast and Furious is built off of, though, isn't it?
I know it's not the pinnacle of cinema, and I know you have to suspend some disbelief, but that was where it kind of lost me. I know there were a couple of films beforehand where it could have lost me, but that was where I'm like, okay, now I'm a little bit like, I can't defend this film anymore.
The fact that it took him 10 films for that to happen.
I mean,
I was blinded by Vin Diesel, okay? I was blinded by Vin Diesel.
That's also Vin Diesel doing his job then.
Finn, is there anything that you've ever written that you've been really emotionally caught up in and it's blinded you as well?
I don't think it's been a case where I've been like we've seen in the past where it's been like, no one can do anything. The script can't do anything wrong. This is perfectly fine. Doesn't need any kind of alteration. But I have been emotionally connected to a script or a piece of prose or something like that, where I'm like, I don't want to send this out into the world, kind of thing, because I'm worried for what other people might think about it. Like, I'm so emotionally connected to this that I'm like, I don't think I'm ready to kind of release it out there at the moment. And for me, it's I'm working on a novel at the moment. Just like a little side turn from script writing. I'm working on a novel at the moment I've been working on since I was in like high school. It's been going on for a very, very long time. I've gone through multiple rewrites of it. And initially it started off as a self-insert of me and my friends. And I have now since cleaned that up a little bit and kind of made it a little bit more kind of like narrowed down the amount of main characters to kind of make it like a one protagonist or make it a two protagonist kind of story rather than a six protagonist story at one point. But I know it's not ready yet for it to go out. It's not completed. It's not in a position where I can be like, happy with this, let's send it out. I think I'm still a bit too precious about it at the moment. Because it's been with me for so long. And I think that's probably my fault. Like, I haven't either like abandoned it because it's not going anywhere, or got to that point where I'm like, I'm happy with this, I can keep going with it, that sort of thing. And I know that novels are slightly different because they do take a lot longer than a script does to be made, and they're not as in demand as frequently as a script is. But yeah, I do still have that kind of emotional resonance with it where I'm like, this is a part of me over a long period of time that I'm trying to condense into one kind of novel kind of thing.
Well, my question would be, is it is it about sort of the what you would perceive as the quality of the writing, or is it more about like, because if it is sort of emulative of a journey that you've gone on, are you concerned that people are going to sort of judge you based on it, based on the story?
Interesting question, actually, Devin. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's kind of a combination of them both, really. I think mostly I don't think it's anything in there that's like controversial. I think it's not like a memoir or anything like that. It is non-fiction, but I think because it was started off when I was so young and I was in a completely different place than I am now, similar to the script we read out for the vault for the script read. I'm in such a different place I am now than I was when I first started writing it. But I think maybe I've kind of like kept it longer than I needed to in its current format. I think I just need to either let it die or let it kind of like breathe for a bit and then come back to it rather than just constantly adding to it and making it like a giant rubber band ball of nothing.
Because also novels are, I would say, are much more. I think prose in general is a lot harder to detach oneself from, anyway. Just because at the end of the day, it is kind of you, artistically,
Yeah.
outside of, if you give it to an editor or somebody like that, like your novel in terms of the people involved with it, you're the one producing it. When you produce it, it's more or less it what mostly resembles what's going out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not changing it, like it's not being adapted into a video format or an audio format. Like it is just the words on the page and that's what it's going to be, and other people have input, but it is, at the end of the day, the majority of it is going to be your vision of it.
Mm-hmm.
So prose is always so much scarier, I think, because when you're a screenwriter, I always feel like you can hide behind other people, whether that's the director or the editor or the producer or the
Mm-hmm.
studio. They did this, they did that. My poor people, you will never know how good my screenplay was because
They
I
took my
won't release
baby and
it.
they ruined it.
They ruined it. Don't look at the fact that it was a terrible script in the first place. But because writing prose, I think, is much more vulnerable in that process, because yeah, like people are going to look at it and they're going to be able to say that's good writing or that's bad writing. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously art is highly subjective. I mean, and people love 50 Shades of Grey, but I think most of us would look at that and go, that's kind of bad writing. That's a bad sentence structure.
Yeah.
Makes for a
Only
great book
kind
and a
of.
great read for some people. I don't know why I'm trying to appease the 50 Shades fans out there.
You're a
I don't
couple of
want
years
to
too
anger
late.
the L. James fans. I
I think
fear
that ship
them.
has sailed, gone to a different civilization, settled down in another civilization, and is not coming
They
back,
might
Devon.
come back. You never know. I mean, um didn't the like the writer of the Twilight books basically decide to like rewrite the series from like Edward Cullen's perspective?
You are correct. Yes, I
Mhm.
think Gina mentioned this in a
Yeah.
previous podcast. Yes.
But then everyone's like, it's such a better story, but
Yeah.
it's probably just because they're a better writer now.
Yeah. There's years have passed since she had her first book, and now she's got her 17th book, and she's so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no one can say that for E.L. James.
Same shit, different book.
Right, now the Twilight people are gonna come for me for comparing their author to ELJ.
We need to put trigger warning on the podcast. Don't listen if
Devin
you are
slags off.
if you like Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey.
Yep.
That's why we invite you on, Devin, just to slag off Twilight.
Can you guys think of what was the last character that kind of like had you like emotionally invested in their story? Like, what character
What,
kind of
writing?
like gripped you? Yeah, as a writer and also in media, that sort of thing.
I've got a very recent one about a piece of a film that I watched.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a subscription to Mubi, which is why I watch so many movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, and I'm going to plug Mubi so much because they're the best.
You hear that,
because
Devin? You hear that, people? Give Devin a free subscription,
I
please.
I just want to be watching Mubi all day, because they have, it's peak international cinema. Like the weirdest things to like the best things. Like I can go open Mubi and pick a movie to watch and know in my soul that I have no idea what I'm getting into, And there's something exciting about that, because sometimes you might wind up watching a Palme d'Or film, a Palme d'Or winning movie called Titania, about a woman having sex with a truck. Was I planning on having that be my Thursday night? No. Was the movie good? The first half of it was good. Actually, no, the latter half, when the sex truck stuff wasn't a part of it. There were some more interesting questions that were being asked, and that was just there. That part of the movie was good. Or
he just goes to work the next morning and goes, that bus seems quite fit.
quite interesting. Or I'll come across this film that I watched recently called Ramen Shop, and it's literally about a young guy who owns a ramen shop with his dad, and his dad passes away, and he basically goes back to Singapore to reconnect with his mom's family, because they moved to Japan and basically kind of cut ties with his mom's family. And the movie's about him trying to reclaim this recipe from the mom's side of his family to make good soup, because that's what you want to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of on board because we were going to go to Japan for our honeymoon, and I was like, this will be nice to get me in the mood. I love ramen. Why not watch a movie about a guy who has a ramen shop? Like, it'll be a cozy Tuesday night. The emotional devastation that I went through was unfounded. Because I don't want to spoil the movie for people, but ultimately, I really connected with the main character, because for me, food was like a very big part of like connecting with my wider family, and sort of people coming together, and like, I am a self-described feeder. Like, I love giving people food, like it's my love language. And seeing it represented in this story in such a profound way kind of unlocked something that I wasn't prepared to face, in the sense that I immediately was like texting my mom, like, oh, can you remember me having ever sort of cooking a meal for my grandmother before, because she was the one that taught me to cook. And then suddenly I just had this realization of like, holy shit, like this person gave me this part of my life that was so important to me, and I don't even know if I ever actually shared it with her as an adult. And I felt so profoundly sad by that notion, because that's kind of what the film was about, of like, ultimately being at this point towards the end of the movie where he's making this dish, and it's like, this food is what keeps my family alive, and keeps them close to me. Every time I make this dish, I'm basically making it for them. And I was sort of suddenly realized, like, I had never done that when maybe I should have. And it was such an overwhelming emotional experience for me that basically I think my wife was like, I forget what she was playing, but she was playing something on the PlayStation 5, and I was just like, came downstairs, and I was just like, I'm not emotionally ready for anything anymore.
But she's like, oh my god, Devin, what happened? How? Is there anything I can do to help?
The ramen, and the ramen was delicious, and his parents were there at the end eating the ramen.
It would have been worse if she just turned around and was like, I fancy Chinese tonight, do you? And then like, ah!
No. There's me in Japan sobbing into every bowl of ramen that we had.
Wow, happy honeymoon.
How about you, Andy?
Tears of joy, Andy. Tears of joy.
It's not salty enough.
It's umami.
I think for me it's, I've not really watched a lot of films or TV recently, but I think in the last year it was probably Nobody Wants This, the first season.
Oh, you mentioned this before, yeah.
Yeah, where Kirsten Bell and is Adam Brody?
The one that wasn't in
Brody,
The Pianist.
Anyway. Not Adrian.
No, not Adrian. Yeah, where they're portraying like a healthy relationship, because I think at that time my relationship was on like teetering on the edge, and there's a lot of like unresolved issues for me from that relationship, so to have like this really beautiful kind of healthy relationship on screen and being explored and being presented like so beautiful, I just thought it was beautiful. Like, it's everything I wanted, and it was the complete opposite to what I was having and experiencing, and I think that broke me inside. And I've avoided TV and film ever since.
She put her foot through the TV in the living room. It's like, no, I can't deal with it again.
Smash that remote through the screen. I was like, fuck this.
Well, Andy, what if I introduced you into ramen shop? How about my emotional baggage meets your emotional baggage?
Bye.
We have emotionally healthy ramen.
And that's the name of my punk rock band.
I mean, maybe that's what we need. It's not what we want, but it's what we need.
Yeah.
But it's been quite interesting that it has, as it's like the first part of your question, Finn, of like, have I written anything that's emotionally hit me? And it's been such a long time. And it's not like I haven't written things that I'm like, this is emotionally believable and this is like makes, like it doesn't elicit any sort of response on my end. But it's just fascinating because it is so subjective sometimes. And I sometimes think about like that old adage. I think it was like Will Ferrell or somebody who's saying like, oh, if you're like laughing a lot on a comedy set, then your comedy probably isn't going to be that funny.
I vaguely remember that, and I can't. Obviously, I know it's Will Ferrell, but I can't remember where from. I vaguely remember it.
Because I think there were some times where they were saying like some of the funniest moments. I think it was like from filming Talladega Nights. He was like the funniest moments were the ones that like didn't land for like cast and crew, but then like played really well in the theaters, and the stuff that was really funny to cast and crew like wasn't landing well in the theaters. And I always keep that in mind because I'm sort of like, because the last time I think I ever got emotional was something that I was writing, was actually the ending of my last book that I wrote, where this character that's had this terrible time basically like kind of attains freedom. And it's very much sort of this like drive off into the sunset, and they kind of get a happy ending, which kind of like really is unexpected and undermines the point of the book. Whereas when you actually think about it, they don't get a happy ending because you kind of learn what happens to them after that moment. But I purposefully choose to end the book on that moment in their life where they are happy and they're feeling themselves and they're like stepping out into the world as themselves for the first time. And I remember getting really emotional about that, mostly because I couldn't actually decide if I was emotional because I'd finished the book and I was just so relieved to be done with the book, or if it was actually just like a quite cathartic moment and I was just so enveloped with that character at the time that I was feeling that same elation that they were feeling, and that hopefully and I think other people felt, because when other people have read the book, they've said that character, I have about 4 perspectives in that book, and they're like, that character is written the strongest. And I'm just like, yeah, it's because I think that's the character like I got on with the best.
Those characters you're writing,
if you can get if you can get like happiness transference from your character, does that mean you can write them getting high and free high?
I don't think
Or getting
it quite works like
drunk.
that, because every time I feel like I've seen or read depictions of people getting high or drunk, they always just seem so miserable.
When I wrote The Whistler, when I did the London Film Academy, this guy's feedback always sticks in my head because I wasn't writing it as an emotional piece. I was writing it from, I think, probably like a place of frustration, because the main character was inspired by someone who was really pissing me off at work at that time. And one of their behaviors that they were exhibiting was whistling really high pitch and really out of tune. And it just kind of like morphed into this story about this guy who he thinks like whistling is his big, like his show, his talent, his everything. And when I finished that and I turned it in, the feedback I got was, I really hated reading this because it made me feel things I didn't want to feel. And I felt very proud of that feedback in some ways, because like, I don't know what you're feeling or how you're relating to this guy, but I didn't intend
But I got
you
you.
to.
I got you, kind of thing.
But I got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Ding.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things that I've ever written is a weird experimental 20-minute like stage play, and the only reason why I love it so much is because the only thing I've ever written that's made my wife cry, and I'm like, gotcha.
So for me, recently, a character that's emotionally resonated with me has been I saw it's a couple of years ago now actually, but I recently saw a staged version of this in the theatre in our city. But the film version of the musical of Matilda, and the main character of Matilda, emotionally resonated with me because it reminded me when I was little and when I was a small little bullied kid. It reminds me of that and like how thankful I am for the teachers that were around me and the friends that I had at the time to kind of get me through that process. And it reminded me of like those golden age days of when you were a kid before everything goes to shit. And it's kind of like, yes, I was a bullied little kid, but like there were joyful moments, there were exciting moments, like being in your favorite lessons at school and being like surrounded by people that you cared about and they cared about you, that kind of thing. It reminded me of that, and this is going to sound really whatever. Who cares, Finn? The joy of learning when you're in that stage, not so much later on, but like when you're younger, the joy of learning is quite a powerful thing that does tend to get a bit overlooked.
The joy of learning. We could do a whole other podcast episode about the joy of learning.
And then in terms of like writing a character that like I've emotionally resonated with, I mentioned it in the last episode, but what I'm writing at the moment, which I've actually submitted to the script swap at Script East Midlands, is on my police procedural script. The main character's daughter, I love writing for her. She's so easy for me to write for. Like, I've got her and one of the other characters. They are a joy to write for because I can picture them in my head. I know what they're about to say. I know what they can say, what they're thinking, that sort of thing. And like emotionally, I gravitate towards them a lot because one of them. So the character's daughter is based on one of my friends and also an amalgam of other people that I've known in real life that have been like influential and positive to me. And I put them into that character. And that's kind of like emotionally I am invested in that character as well. And the other character, which Andy, you've read a part of the script with this character in, is the main character's sister-in-law, who is the stereotypical battle axe. And I love writing for her because she can just be horrible to people and it's great. Obviously there is nuance there as well, but she has this kind of like fire behind her and she has this kind of like prickliness that I don't possess myself, and it's kind of nice, kind of cathartic to kind of put that into the character. But like if I was that kind of person, this is kind of how I'd react, kind of thing, without being a self-insert or anything like that. Like it kind of, I can explore that kind of part of myself that I don't normally use, but put it in like a healthy way in this kind of like this character that I've got. So yeah,
I'd be curious that do you think that's working so well because you have that distance to that character, so you can kind of see like where to implement it and where to use it because the emotional resonance it's giving you is one of joy because you recognize that you're distant from it and you can be playful with it because you have that distance, as opposed to like, imagine if somebody actually was a battle axe of a person. You told them to write a battle axe of a person character, and they were like, "I'm a bit too close to this. I'm uncomfortable writing this."
Why can't I write this? Am I a terrible person?
Basically.
But yeah, no. It's two characters that I've written in the current script where I'm really enjoying writing it because it gets me to explore kind of an area of my personality that I don't often kind of doesn't come to the surface kind of thing. It's something that's probably internal, but probably not something that I express. And also, it also kind of like it reminds me of positive aspects of my friends that are around me, kind of thing, and like how that would benefit our main character without it becoming like without it becoming like a Mary Sue or like a Marty Stu kind of character. But kind of being beneficial to character without being overused, kind of thing.
If you're writing something that's like the opposite of who you are in a daily basis, so you also run the risk of becoming emotionally attached to that character too, and not quite having that distance, because it's like it's your outlet of being someone else. You don't want to protect that, don't you? And you can become invested in that. Like if you were just being whimsy through this one character or this one, setup that you've got, you're going to want to protect that because you're getting a lot of emotion back from it.
I've also kind of like in my mindset as I'm writing the script, I'm like going like, I'm not gonna make it where everyone's got kind of might get cut out. I'm using the next podcast, but don't want to give all my characters plot armor. I want them all to kind of be vulnerable to things happening to them, and not just be like an island of like, this is my favorite character. No one can ever hurt this favorite character. He's sitting in the corner, not doing anything. Like, we just leave it over there. It's fine. Like, no, he's going to get hit. He's going to get shot. He's going to do this. Like, I'm going to hurt them. This is going to sound so sociopathic. I'm going to hurt my characters, but I'm not going to be afraid to hurt my characters, kind of thing.
Well, I do remember there was somebody who gave somebody else feedback at Script East Midlands where they said, I get the impression you don't want to put your characters through something emotionally distressive. I think I'm just paraphrasing what they're saying, but I think they literally said, I don't think you want to hurt your characters. But that's definitely, something that you can run afoul of. Like when I first started writing, a lot of feedback that I got at the very start of my writing journey was like, all your characters are too nice to each other. I just wanted everyone to get along. That's really boring, isn't it?
You've not got that killer instinct.
Yeah, you just need to stab them in the eye, be fine. Stab them in the eye at dinner.
I have the opposite problem now. There's nobody left in my stories. That's what happens when you hit your 30s, people. You just start killing everyone off.
Kill your darlings.
Figuratively. Legal reasons.
Yeah, no. Figuratively, not in real life. We are not advising for murder.
But there's also that part of it's interesting, right? Because I think there's also something really. I think it was they always say that with like method acting, right? In terms of like going to a safe space to allow yourself to sort of like go into that kind of mindset and that sort of mentality to like open yourself up to some sort of different natural response to something like that. And it's interesting because like, until you're almost in that scenario, you never know how you're going to respond in that sort of way, which is why I think having these kind of characters where you're sort of like, well, I think I would respond this way, or, this emotionally feels correct to respond this way in this circumstance could mean something entirely different to somebody else because that context in that scenario in which that exists is entirely different.
I think I've got similar problems to what you've got when you first started out. Is sometimes I'm too nice to my characters, and my characters are too nice because I see the world. I mean, I hope everyone's all nice, so I struggle with bringing negative emotion into my stories on purpose, like people being gits to each other. I can't quite do it. But when it comes to writing something from my own experience or my own emotions, because I'm very negative towards myself, I find that very easy to write. But people being grossly violent and shit, I can't do it.
Yeah, your optimism is really quite disgusting at work.
There's been many occasions where Devin's had to take his desk and move it somewhere else.
Oh no, I always get I'll get like a GIF from Andy, and I'll respond just like, yeah, today pretty much sucks, and she's like, but it might not, and I'm like,
I kind of get that as well because like when you're doing like a first or a second draft of a script, that sort of thing, you are still kind of blocking out where you want the story to go and where you want the characters to go, sort of thing. So I've also fallen into that trap of like the characters are being too nice. I need them to be a bit more gritty. I need them to kind of feel a bit more real. They're not just like, oh hi, how did you do? Oh, how do you do? How did no real conversation really kind of happens like that. So you kind of have to kind of like make it feel a bit more realistic. Because someone will be like going like, what the fuck are you doing there? And then have a conversation start from that rather than like, oh, how are you doing? It's like it doesn't always start like that. Or having a conversation start in the middle of that kind of thing. But yeah, now we're going to script writing back 101. That's I'm going off on a tangent here. I'm trying to rein myself back in.
But it does come from an interesting point of like when we start writing in terms of like, when you design your characters, do you design, thinking about those emotional journeys that, you need to put them through in terms of thinking about what, because some of the best stuff is always going to pull it back to D&D for you, Finn.
Oh, thanks,
when we
Devin.
go to when you're playing a campaign of D&D, some of the best moments of
I have my dice
campaigns that
ready.
I have. Perfect. I've got my
Sorry.
dice bag. I'm looking at my dice bag over on the counter. Some of the best experiences I've had in campaigns is when the party is at odds with each other. But there's like, it's not the party's at odds, but you don't have the sort of plot conceit to continue together, but it's
Mhm.
more of like your characters have they have a deeper connection that they can't quite put together, and neither of them want to go away from each other, but you're obviously in this moment having a dramatic conflict, which always feels more satisfying in D&D because you're inhabiting that character emotionally to play out the scene and play out the scenario. So when I go to design characters in my writing, I think about like, what are the emotional differences that these two people have, and how can I construct my plot to bring those to the forefront?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like those moments where it's like not quite splitting the party, but like emotionally, like they're split as to what to do, what's the best course of action, that sort of thing, because they've got their own way that their character may act in this sort of scenario that might be at odds with what they actually need to do, kind of thing. And then there's that conflict of what they should do and that sort of thing.
Not really. I've never played D&D.
You
Which
need
is
to play
sad. I feel like
D&D.
you'd actually really enjoy it.
Yeah, you would. You'd be great at it, Andy. It's all about making shit up, and that's what you do with writing all the time. So
Yeah, but it's more performative, and
you don't have to.
I
You
don't
don't
know.
have to do like critical role or anything like that. Where you have to put an accent on and do a whole action, that sort of thing. Just like you just have to embody a character.
I mean, yeah, some of my most emotionally profound moments I am not an actor. I do not to say myself to be an actor of any kind, but there was a point I remember where I was playing one of my characters who essentially had been brought back to life by a god, entered into the servitude of that god, etc., etc. And it felt like I'd reached the natural conclusion of their hero's journey because they were presented with a choice of like, if you give up your powers to save this one person who they weren't like attached to the party, they were kind of like an NPC that had been along with us for the ride sort of thing, that like my character had grown close to, not sort of intimately, but very much camaraderie wise and things like that. And there was that moment, and that character was also very important to somebody who had become romantically entangled with them in the party. And so my character was given this choice of like, if you give up your power, like from the god, you can save this person. And it was this really kind of big moment where my character thought that basically they were saying goodbye to everyone because they thought that they were like about to die. And because very much for him, he'd been like, quite an arrogant person and very much sort of a loner on a journey for a very long time and always thought they were better than everyone else, but suddenly was being like immensely selfless in this kind of their final moment. And I just remember like really actually tearing up in the moment because it did feel like this character was on their way.
It's a
Um,
goodbye, isn't
and
it? It's like a
so
final goodbye. It's nice. It's
exactly.
bittersweet.
And so, but I didn't have any silly voice. I didn't have any sort of. I wasn't.
Doing a giant gesture.
I wasn't projecting into my Discord chat. But it's one of those things where I think because you mentioned that you were doing some theater classes, right? In terms of like, I think this is why performance is always so interestingly tied to writing in that kind of way, and because there is something deeply that allows for that deep emotional connection when you're sort of being with the words, if that's a wanky thing I can use.
You can be wanky.
It's the birth of the word
It's
wanky
true
on the
though.
podcast.
It is true though. Like I am a lot freer when I'm writing than I am in myself as a person. So like
I
to
agree with
extend that
that.
to like D&D is even harder.
I actually think it'd be easier for you because of that. I think you'd get I think it'd be tough in a few sessions, but I think once you kind of really got into it, because you would turn your brain to be like, oh, this is a writing mode.
The
I
first
don't
couple of
have to be
sessions
me.
of a D&D
Mm.
campaign is basically like, I don't know what I'm doing. Boop, 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 boop. There's some numbers. Let's go with that. And then after like the second session, you're kind of like, oh, okay, I'm doing this kind of character. I need to do this. I think it slowly starts to sink in, but doesn't automatically like click. Like it's a slow burn.
How has this turned into a D&D
I
recruitment?
don't know. Just we
Just
like
got
how
me on
wide
the
wide tangents. Last time we had Devin on here, we were talking about world building. We ended up talking about video games. It's like we always tend to do this. It's like it's a thing. It's part of our act.
It's just for me. It's like it's because I'm not an actor, right? And I think
Actor.
when it comes to when it comes to writing, we do have to embody characters to a certain degree, right? But we don't have to go as far as to perform that embodiment. We just have to try to like channel it.
Mm.
And for me, like the best physical way I can describe it to somebody else is like if you've ever played D&D and you just had this emotional moment that you've accidentally kind of channeled, like that is what writing is to a certain degree. Like you've just come to something organically through your process, through um, you know, being that character doing kind of the same character over and over and over again until you kind of, and again, I'm so sorry, I'm just gonna get wanky again, until you find the core truth of their identity as a person. Like it's the same thing.
I
Like
love it.
if an actor does a load of takes, on a set, that's the process. You're working towards something, and the thing that comes out from that is quite real and unexpected. It makes you feel all tingly inside, which is why we'll always say, like, everyone always talks about, the runner high that you get when you're exercising or that sort of thing. That's what writing does to me. Like, you hit that emotional point of, like, ooh, this feels good. This is the good stuff.
When you're on a roll and you
But then you
finally
get to
get to
that
that,
point.
and you get into that kind of like groove of like, okay, yeah, I'm writing. Like, I'm in it. I'm in the zone. I can just keep reading off pages and pages and pages and pages of stuff. Exactly that. Exactly that. It's like a runner's high.
And then you take that hat off and you put a different hat on and you say, it needs to stop now.
And then you realise you've done 80 pages and you're not even finished Act 1.
Well, that's true, right? And it's something interesting where I think, because you were talking in the last episode about overwriting, and it's one of those things where I think there's a big difference between overwriting because there's some place that the character's going, but they can't quite get there in that scene because maybe the context isn't correct, versus I'm overwriting because I don't have a clue what's happening, so I'm just actually waffling.
It's
as
a
opposed
constant
to like
stream of consciousness in that scene, and it's just kind of like plotting it out, but in long form.
I wrote audio for the first time this year.
Woo!
Yes.
Oh damn.
And it's just interesting to me because it's also one of the things, it's like, I think it's one of the best things I've written in a while, which is also funny because the idea is the same idea that I've already written multiple drafts of a feature film script of, but then I was adapting that to audio format. And so having done that, it was like, oh, there's all these really interesting things and dynamics to play with, and I can really bring out the drama because it's a two-person scene and you can only hear people talk, so how do you make that dramatic? But then retranslating that into a recent draft of the feature film script where it's like, oh, this is really interesting because these characters now have this dynamic that I could explore, but how can I explore that without them just standing still talking to each other?
Like just being a talking
Because I'm no
heads.
longer in audio. Exactly.
Love that. I love that.
Andy knows which script I'm talking about.
I do. The one I'm very excited about. Where's it at?
So it's currently out. It's still out at the production companies, and my manager has said that it's not a no. It's a we haven't gotten to it yet, and so I'm kind of guessing, yeah, which is good because it's not no. But I'm also
on the
guessing
pile.
on the pile, exactly, which is where I'd rather be because A, I don't have to think about that project. It's just out in the world and I can focus on other things.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's also nice knowing that things are kind of moving in a direction, even if they are technically static again.
That is the life of a
Keep
writer,
pushing
though.
other
There'll be
things
lots of
forward.
periods of being static and lots of periods where things are moving. But yeah, that's really good. It's like really like positive news to hear as well. Just that it's like he's at a production company that it can. You don't know what's going to come out of it, but like it's one step closer.
Yeah. I will say, like, I don't know if this would be something to talk about on a different episode or something, but it's really fascinating, like, how much hasn't changed since I've gotten a manager. And I don't know whether that's like a good message to put out into the world or not. Where I'm just sort of like, it's really like I'm not at a stage where things have like happened yet, but I am at a stage where it's like this extra uber objective person has now stepped into my space and is like reading my writing and is not the type of person as well, which I like, who's not going to be like, this is great, or like, don't worry about this, like, it's going to be fantastic. Like, she's read 2 of my scripts that I've redrafted recently, but first wrote like fresh potato out of uni. And she was like, these are all nonsense. These are both just trying to do way too much in worlds that are very, very complicated. And it's like, other people have read versions of the scripts and like liked them, but because they've been along that process with me, so they know information that I know that maybe not isn't on the page anymore, which is super fascinating. Which is why which is why it was like interesting to hear from her. It was just sort of like haven't got a clue what's happening. I am too confused to be interested, and like she even pointed out this one moment. She was like, this character has this maternal instinct that randomly kicks in with this young person. Don't believe it. That seems random as hell. I was like, great, perfect. But it's interesting because these are me showing older scripts compared to the newer things, which has been it's just been interesting for me to see like how much I've grown by like revisiting those older scripts where I might have felt more proud of them at the moment, that they were more polished and more ready to go. But actually, these newer scripts that I've written, I say newer scripts, like the one script I recently read. I'm trying to think what my actual newest script, like my newest idea script is, and I think the newest thing that I've written is actually my book. everything else, everything else is literally I wrote the first episode of the TV pilot that I most recently wrote the draft of. I wrote that pilot first year of lockdown.
Oof.
At
So I
least 5
actually
years working on that one script. On and
yeah.
up.
And that is a script as well as the first script that I've actually that I felt confident about sending out to agents.
Mm-hmm.
Blimey.
That's huge.
Whereas the book that I wrote, I finished last year. So that's like, but I started that in lockdown as well. So that's taken 4 years. And I technically call that finished because I don't know what else to do with it at this stage. It's part, literary thesis, part novel, part horror novel. So it's like, who knows what that is? That's one of those things that I still don't know what to do with it. I love it to pieces
Mm-hmm.
because it's so weird and it's so me. But I'm also very marketing minded in my brain that's like, no one's ever gonna buy this. If this sells 200 copies, then it will be a miracle.
This is the best thing I've ever written, but it's for me.
Oh, 100%. And I've also sworn that I will never write anything like it ever again because it was so annoying to write. Because I had like, you would have 2 or 3 stories unfolding on the same page, 2 stories happening in the actual body of the text, with a third story happening in like citations at the bottom of the page.
Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah,
That is intriguing.
It's the only time that I ever felt like I was operating on a narrative level that was like so far up my own ass that I didn't know which way was up. But I do think I had some good character arcs that came out of it. For some characters, not for others.
An interesting way of doing it as well. I've not thought of it like that before, but that's I'm intrigued by that. I'm impressed.
I mean, it's one of those things where, when you have like when you're weirdly coming out of a time where you've been locked by yourself in your own thoughts and just been surrounded by books and academic writing on books and all this other stuff, and somebody's just sort of like, here's a blank page, and literally that's your day. Go on.
Have fun.
Have a play. See what happens.
Go and roll in the mud.
Yeah. Some people roll masterpieces. Some people like Gina will put out a wonderful book in 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got me who spends 3 years being like, yeah, but what if the person in the margins of the page wrote this and it was sideways and they were going crazy while they were doing it?
It's not a marathon or a sprint. Everything gets fully formed in its own time.
Yeah. Can you escape the madness of your own brain? That's kind of what I've learned from that.
As a tagline for the podcast, can you escape the madness of your own brain? Featuring Devin Tupper.
The short answer is no.
No. The short answer is I'm still there.
The court is still out.
I unfortunately have a timeshare that I can't seem to get rid of in my own brain.
I do remember something that and I'm going to end up paraphrasing it because I can't remember the exact bit. Something like, you might be writing your life because you're interested in it, but it's not very interesting to other people.
Hmm.
I always bear that in mind when I'm writing, when I'm aware that I'm writing from my emotional side and my personal side, my therapy writing, and that's why my Substack's not taken off.
When your emotions take the wheel, you need to rein them back in.
But it's so interesting, right? Because I sometimes like to pull into my own Substack that I haven't touched in like good probably 2 years. The thing that got the most attention on that Substack was me writing about quitting writing and how like emotionally difficult it was to eventually arrive at a place where I suddenly realized that it was gonna be a part of me for the rest of my life. There wasn't really much I could do about it. Like I could have big long gaps, but it's something I would always and will always come back to. And that is the thing that people resonated with the most and like had the most readers, in the sense that people actually shared it to other people and that sort of thing. Like you can see like all the data, like where it goes and stuff. And I remember that being really not really surprising, because I think when it comes to nonfiction, everyone wants that sort of like, they want your perspective on something. In a way, it's like, what's your viewpoint on it, and how do you make it so personal to you that it's sort of genuine? But then it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because I think, a lot of my favorite nonfiction reading is things like memoir, where it's like supremely personal, like really, really deep, and like I get to know this person inside and out, and that's why I'm reading this, versus somebody else who's like, I'm going to write a book on the history of swimming. And I'm not going to tell you much about myself, because why would I? It's swimming. I don't swim, but I'm curious.
I invented swimming.
It's like if Stephen Fry in Norse mythology, like if he gave you like 3 of the chapters of that book were like, and this is how I first came to Norse mythology. And this is what Norse mythology meant to me personally and deeply, and like all this other stuff. It's like, no, he just tells you about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Stephen Fry, so we all love it. But
yes,
you know what I mean.
I've really enjoyed this podcast. It's been really good. I think it's going to be one of the top 10s.
As always, we have a topic in mind, and then we go on really random tangents and routes. And you're right, you're a terrible sat nav.
But I can be a great editor.
You can be a great editor. Why we keep bringing you on, Devin? I remember like when we recorded the first one with Devin, I was so nervous because obviously this was the first time I'd met Devin as well. I'd heard of the Hello Devin, but I'd actually met him before. So I think on the first podcast, I was very kind of nervous and very kind of like giggly. Like I didn't know what to expect. And kind of like, and then I realized how lovely Devin is. I was like, oh, this is amazing, that sort of thing. And obviously this podcast has been no different. So
We'll take that as a win.
Yay!
Yeah, thank you for joining us for this chat.
Of course. I mean, realistically, all I wanted to get out of this chat was to have a longer recording than with Hugh, but I don't know if we may accomplish that. So I'll have to come back and try to beat that record again.
Thank you so much, Devin, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy, as it always is. I appreciate any opportunity to derail your...
If the podcast trolley and Devin's on it, it's like, wee!
We're off and away.
And somehow we end up back at the end.
Somehow. I think because Andy's like, I want to leave.
He just replaces herself with a cat and is like, okay, I'm done.
I would do that.
She would.
She has to replace herself with Vin Diesel. Then it's done.
The podcast would just be silent. It would just be Devin talking to himself.
But you can, like, half of this podcast has just been like I've had a screenshot on my camera instead of me.
It's on a loop.
Yeah.
After a couple of minutes, like you just start blinking, just to make sure that it's like not a still image. Yeah, so you're always welcome back again, Devin. We're always happy to have you. We jest, but we have
you're very
fun.
welcome to invite yourself along again.
Third time's the charm, right?
That sounds so mean. It's like, invite yourself along, don't ask, just come on. And it does feel a little bit like the students are listening to the teacher for these kind of podcasts, and I enjoy that. So
I do feel like this time around it was more of the teacher kept walking into the class and saying, we're not learning anything today because I don't feel like it. It's like somebody walked into the room and is like, are we going to talk about the Bronte sisters? Nope, it's Dostoevsky.
He just takes the book and throws out the window.
Yep.
This is how we'll be learning in our class.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation.
And we hope you'll join us on the Path publication. I have been Finn.
I've been Ash, apparently.
I'm Andy.
Kill me. And we'll see you next time for another episode of Path publication. Bye, guys. Bye, and Merry Christmas.